So, I got to start with y'all don't disappoint. And as always, I'm so appreciative. I really, really like that you guys are tuned in, leaving comments. Folks are coming back, new people are showing up. And again, not super significant right now, but each and every step counts. Every comment, every like, even if we don't necessarily agree, I am open to any kind of discussion that includes disagreement, but I'm not open to disrespect. So watch your mouth. That's it. But let's get into what I want to touch on in this go around. So, in my last conversation about villains and heroes, the notion that trauma can kind of put us on this pendulum swing, right? I do believe that in an instance where we have emotional threats or the perception of an emotional threat, which can be rooted in trauma, um, we have a response that is very much fight or flight, right? And this is where we have that, villain or hero sort of thing. And a particular part of the conversation that we were having focused on me mentioning that I'm at this point in my life where I don't want these addiction cycle friendships, right? Where I'm looking to embody relationships that are based in who's good for me and not just what feels good. A while ago, I did a video about, when you go certain places, you go alone. And I think that I want to rehash that because I don't think that it should have a negative connotation, right? It's the type of thing that oil and water don't sit at each other's boundaries arguing about why they don't mesh, right? They just get to a certain molecular structure and they no longer can. You got hydrophobic, hydrophilic, and the boundaries are just set. And I don't think that relationships are actually that rigid. I think that it's important for us to recognize that things change, right? As you change, as you come to your healing, your understanding, you may be a bit different. And as people are going through the hiccups, right? There could be times in your life where you are mad and you want to be mad. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, but what I want to talk about in particular, we're going to call this one sobering up because I had to be honest about not just spousal dynamics, because I think that we can get lost in that space too. But sometimes friendships, colleagues, all of these things can take on this perception of this is how it is. And it doesn't give room for change. It doesn't give room for difference, right? Because a lot of times our relationships require feel good moments, feel good exchange. Of course, you want your relationships to be rooted in happiness and joy and all of these different things. But there's a difference between getting into a relationship and happiness is expanded and having relationships where happiness is needed. Let's talk about it a little bit. I want to share a story with y'all and I'll make it quick. So I had this colleague, right? We were super cool. And this colleague was somebody that I easily was like, yeah, I'm sure that at some point or another, we're probably going to be long term friends, right? And what I really appreciated about this colleague was that she had been very invested in the Black experience and understanding it. So this colleague is a non-Black colleague and was learning something. Spent a lot of time reviewing videos, getting into conversations about it, and just trying to understand what the experience was, learn as much as they could, and again, just embracing it and really recognizing that there's more to us than what's been depicted about us, right? And again, this is what I appreciated about it because it was a representation of a progressive relationship, a dynamic where you don't look at me and you see only a Black woman that went through stuff, that struggled with stuff, but a woman that has also persevered, that has gotten through and is still growing actively and on purpose. But it's a bumpy ride because I'm a little nuts. That's another story for another day. Anyway, inside of that, we developed a closeness, right? And one of the things that she talked about was how different she is from her family. And, we're going to get into, politics just for a hot second. She said that her family was very much uh, for President 47, right? So I'm like, I get it. And she said that a big part of them continuing a relationship is not having a discussion about politics because of their stark contrast in belief. So I'm like, you know what? I get it, right? Like, you know what? You grow and you change and you don't really see eye to eye, but you love people and you embrace them. And I think that, family is where it gets a little bit nuanced. Again, we'll pocket that for another time. So, as I said, she has her background. She has this growing and trying to understand us. So I'm like, yeah, now we're super cool. We're super tight. One day, she was having a conversation. I wasn't, present for this conversation. And the conversation went a little something like criticism of a close friend of hers. We have been working on a project together, and I'm in a very interesting place where I am not overexerting for a number of reasons. I think I can do a who the fuck did I work for kind of series because I think that these kinds of stories get really good. Again, we'll pocket it for later. But anyway, we're working on this project, and everyone has their portion of this project that they're working on and they're committed to. Long story, very complicated. Her friend was having a tough time, was getting some, constructive criticism. But of course, this is negative feedback. And most people don't like negative feedback, right? For whatever reason, she jumped up and she's like, nah, if you have a problem with my friend, your actual problem is with Sarah because she should be doing more. And I'm like, bitch, how the fuck did I get into this? Right. So understand that she came and she told me this story after the fact. And after we go back and forth and we kind of hash out this conversation and what was said, she came to this bubble up of, you did say that you didn't speak to this person and that this person didn't speak to you and that you weren't a part of all of these things. And I'm thinking to myself, but somehow, some way, I'm being thrown up out of your mouth in the midst of a conversation that could be detrimental to me if this conversation were to go left. Because understand, if it's a conversation about criticism and we're at work, you are very much running the risk of me having some sort of fallout based on that. And the worst case scenario is I could lose my job. So why on earth would you think that that is okay? Here's the thing about sobering up in relationships. You see, what I didn't take heed to, right, is that when she told her family story, she's a black sheep. When we were having a conversation, it was rooted in this black sheep. Understanding that we don't always fit in, we don't always have opportunities, we don't always get a chance to be recognized or understood. So, what does that mean? That means that we tend to exist in a place of insecurity. We tend to exist in a place that means that people will scrutinize us, that we don't always feel like we are conformed or a part of a group. We don't always feel like we are accepted. And you see, what I didn't pay attention to in this instance was that the difference is I'm supposed to be the person that's always ostracized. And her experience has opportunity for variation. It has opportunity for forgiveness. But even better, if it didn't, it doesn't mean that she didn't feel some type of way emotionally and she got defensive. And even when I didn't do anything to her, I became the punching bag in that dynamic. So here's the thing about sobering up. Think about it like an addict in a cycle. I could even tell you this like with my relationship with food. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm like, oh, I don't need to eat that. I need to stay on this diet. I need to get my stuff together. I need to this, I need to that. And then you go ahead and you have a moment of weakness because it was a hard day and you really don't want to deal with this and you really don't want to deal with that. And you say, I'm just going to have a little bit of this. And before you know it, you had too much of that. And next thing you're doing, you're beating yourself up. You're lashing out. You're defensive. And I said, oh, that's what happened. She got in her feelings. And that moment that she felt like she would be ostracized, or better yet, that her group would be dismantled. Because remember, she's the black sheep in her roots, she's the black sheep in her home. So she has to protect her group, even if it's at the cost of somebody that was also a part of the cause. Because this is the nature of relationships where there are trauma bonds and you treat people like they're an addiction cycle. When you're not okay or when you need your fix, you might not have the best attitude. You might not be as positive. You might even hurt yourself and those around you. And so I bring that up to say, I'm very intentional these days about who I hang out with, why I hang out with them, who I share space with, who I break bread with, because I want to be around folks that don't just make me feel good, but are actually good for me. So if you catch yourself at any given moment just feeling like, what do me and this friend have in common? What do me and this spouse have in common? What does me and this family member have in common? What does me and this colleague have in common? If it is rooted inside of something that is pain, does that mean that once you figure out how to deal with that pain, once that pain goes away, if the relationship will withstand not having any pain in the seed of it? So I hope that you enjoy. Reflect positively on your relationships. Look for love in relationships. Look for growth in relationships. Be intentional about who's with you and even how you show up, because sometimes you could be the person that's in that addiction cycle. There's nothing wrong. You're not a villain for it. But a little bit of personal accounting, a little inventory on what's happening on your heart might be a little bit helpful. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for hanging out with me for a little bit, and I will see you next time.